You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. The Five Rings Podcast 2016 Rio Summer Olympics edition on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Kevin, I left the house today.
Wow, day 4, Duane, already, and you left the house? It's about time because cats were getting hungry and, there was no more food, right? So.
Yeah, no, I went to join. There wasn't a big crowd of Voyageurs. Voyageurs is the National Canadian Soccer Supporters Club. But I joined a small group of Canadian Voyageurs this afternoon at Scallywags Pub, which has always been good to us.
In front of the show, we met the owners, both of us, in front of the show, Scallywags, and your place to watch Canada sometimes in Toronto.
Yes, exactly. It's the unofficial home of the Voyageurs in Toronto. And, it's only unofficial in the sense that there's no direct ties between us, but they're always good to us. And if you want to go watch them on Friday with us, I think there'll be a little bit bigger of a crowd on Friday because Canada won the group today over Germany, and that's going to get a lot of attention in the days ahead. Yeah.
Before we move on, Duane, who was the team playing today? And can you tell me what they have done with our Canadian women's national team?
I don't know. I've watched that team a hell of a lot longer than most people, and I'm not saying that to brag, just to try and provide you with a little context. And I cannot remember a week in which they've been more impressive than this past.
3 wins, Duane, 9 points.
Yeah, and look,
wow.
People could say, yeah, but they won the bronze medal in in London. I've been over this 100 times. I'm not going to crap on it anymore, but the reality is that they didn't play particularly well for long stretches of that tournament, whereas this tournament they are. And the irony is, of course,
I'm worried.
Yeah, it could end in the quarterfinals and there'd be no medal to show for it, but I think that will still be a worthwhile tournament. But we'll probably have more time to talk about this later, and certainly we have a guest on today that we did a pre-record interview, and just as a bit of a heads up, this was timing-wise, it was Gavin Day, who's doing some work for the CBC on the research side for the Olympics here. He had to work tonight, so I had to do the interview earlier before Kevin was able to join us. We're going to run that now. We talk a lot about Gavin's experiences, and he's covered a lot of these athletes in the lead up to the Olympics, so he really has a good insight and has covered the women for a long, long time, Kevin.
Absolutely. So we'll listen to Gavin right after this very short break. You are listening to Five Rings Daily on SPN Radio. Your daily Olympic fix for all you Olympic freaks out there. SportsPodcastingNetwork.com. Join us on Twitter at Five Rings Podcast and at SportsPodNet.
And welcome back to Five Rings Daily. I'm Duane Rollins. Joining me on the line is a freelance journalist, Gavin Day. Gavin is doing some research work for the CBC during the Olympic coverage there. He's knee-deep into this stuff, I assume, Gavin. So thanks for taking some time.
Hey, thank you for having me.
All right, let's start with why the Olympics? What gravitates you towards the Olympics as a human being, as someone who likes sports?
Well, first as a journalist, I've always enjoyed covering the stuff. I was in Vancouver in 2010. This is my second Olympics. In the research side of things, I've covered some volleyball and some of the other stuff sort of away from the Olympics. Excuse me. And my whole thing is there's sports that don't get massively covered, and strictly from the journalistic point of view, you get the chance to talk with an athlete, get to know them, and they're very interesting people. Not to put down the pro sports, but in that world, it's all big scrums, and there's the personal element that's missing a little bit. So when I've covered a lot of these things away from the Olympics, it's a chance to get to know somebody who really is interesting, and that's what I often find about these people. And strictly from the sports point of view, it's a lot of these people know they're not going to become fantastically wealthy doing what they do. There are the ones who do make a nice living off what they do, but it's strictly people doing a sport that they love, and that's really the crux of it to me. It's and it is something that comes every 4 years for most people, but there is a lot of stuff in between as well that's still just as enjoyable to watch.
You mentioned a lot of stuff in between, and I know you were out there in the trenches covering a lot of this stuff in the lead up to Rio in terms of the qualifiers and things like that. Just give the listeners a bit of an overview and what your travel schedule's been like over the past few years.
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, in February, I was in Houston covering the women's soccer qualifying. You spoke to me about that. And in the last few months, it was a bit of everything. A lot of it was geared around a little travel that I was doing, but it did all sort of line up perfectly where I was in Japan covering the men's Olympic volleyball qualifying tournament, headed over to Europe. I've gotten to know some of the beach athletes as well. One was actually a random airport meeting once that turned into a chance to get to know an athlete. That was Heather Bansley. That was a number of years ago. But I was in Hamburg for a world tour stop just after essentially that Tokyo indoor tournament that I was covering. So it's been a bit of everything, a lot of volleyball, a lot of soccer, and then you sort of fit some other stuff along the way as you can.
We're going to go back and saw Gavin's covered the Canadian women pretty extensively over the years. So we're going to have a bit of a conversation about that in a moment, but I am interested in the volleyball. You were there seeing that happen firsthand. Did you have any idea that they would jump into the Olympic tournament the way that they did after seeing them?
Well, I mean, in January at first, they played in Edmonton, and that was the opportunity. They were at home. They were the favored team to win. There was a 4-team tournament with Mexico, Puerto Rico, and Cuba. And Cuba has had a very good program, but it was sort of the feeling that this maybe wasn't their time. And so with Canada at home, that January tournament was it. And then when they came second and knew they had to go to Tokyo, it was doable, but it was going to be difficult. It was 7 games in a quick amount of time. They only had 2 days off in between. Teams like Poland and Iran and France and China and Japan were all there. Australia was there. So it was possible, but it was doable. Canada does have one of those underappreciated men's teams. It's a very good team. But they were still missing that moment. It had been 24 years since an Olympic berth. And, they needed something to push that past that sort of thing. And they did. I mean, it was a huge accomplishment, but at the time, you knew they could do it. They had one of the sort of middling ranks of all the teams. But it did all sort of come together, and credit to them for doing that.
Yeah, exactly. Any thoughts quickly on the volleyball tournament as a whole? I mean, obviously the U.S. Were one of the favorites heading in the upset in the first round. Do you still think that generally the powers will emerge at the top in that tournament?
Yeah, I mean, you think they will. I mean, the likes of Brazil playing at home, Italy, Russia. The cool thing about volleyball is that there are a number of teams that can win. So the U.S. just happened to be World Cup champions, but I think they are human. As Canada demonstrated. It is funny how, I'd be tweeting in the middle of the night when I'm in Tokyo, and I'd be getting a few responses, and now suddenly everybody seems to be into this event, and it is cool to see. I mean, it is almost a thing that happens every 4 years where people go, where has this sport been all my life? And then they sort of forget about it for the next 4 years. But the cool thing about that volleyball tournament is there is parity in the sport, and it'll be exciting to see how it plays out. And, a win on the board for Canada, another game against Brazil, and it'll be an absolutely incredible atmosphere in there.
Fair enough. Speaking of sports that people have discovered recently, and it's one that I sort of saw coming, but I'm not sure if many Canadians did prior to the games because they don't get a lot of attention like many of these athletes, and that is the women's rugby sevens. Gavin, you're in a unique position in that you were around the Canadian women a great deal when they went from, I don't want to say no names, but when they went from struggling to get attention to being maybe the second most popular team sport in Canada, right? And in Christine Sinclair, I would argue is the most popular team sport athlete in Canada right now, outside of hockey. I'm excluding, of course. What do you think it's going to be like in the next few months for that rugby sevens team who are currently Canada's darlings right now?
I mean, there's an opportunity. And if you look at what happened with the Canadian women's soccer team 4 years ago, I think there was the added controversy that really kicked it up a notch. There was the game against the United States that added that extra little spice to it. And then, of course, the dramatic goal from Diana Matheson that sort of sealed a modest fairy tale, if you will. So, and then afterwards, they stayed in the spotlight with the Women's World Cup coming up. I know it's, there's no sort of, I guess, equivalent in rugby sevens, but, if you're Rugby Canada, you try to keep these ladies in the spotlight as much as you can, whether it's even organizing, 15s to have some sort of tour in Canada or what have you. But, the moment's there, as it always is after a bronze medal. And, fortune, I think, was already on Canada's side, like I said, with the Women's World Cup coming up. So, the onus is now on Rugby Canada to do something to keep them in the limelight a little bit, because, in a few weeks, it could easily be a situation where people go, hey, remember that rugby sevens bronze medal? No.
Yeah.
But, it's just the nature of the beast. So, we'll see what happens, but the chance is there to capitalize.
Yeah, I mean, with all due respect to Victoria, who's hosted a World Rugby Sevens event for the past few years, I think that Rugby Canada should be looking at Vancouver or Toronto or Montreal to get those women into there as soon as possible for a Rugby Sevens event. I think it would do quite well if they could capitalize on that. But not all Canadian federations do that, so we'll see how this works out in the days ahead. Let's stick with the soccer stuff, though. This is being pre-recorded, so we don't know the results of the Canada-Germany game. Canada has, however, qualified to the quarterfinals. We know that their opponent will either be France, Sweden, or China, most likely. There has been some talk about them massaging the result today to avoid France, but just in general, we know the result already when people are listening. But in general thoughts, do you think that you should avoid looking at a bracket when you're a team like that and just focus on the game ahead? Or do you think you're someone you have to make decisions and think long-term to try and give yourself the best chance to medal?
Yeah, I firmly believe that you have to beat the best if you're on the way to a medal. So you don't sort of take your foot off the gas. You look at Brazil; they tried to do that in London 4 years ago. They tried to sort of play for a favorable result, and then they got knocked out early. So, it's a game against Germany. I don't think Canada can beat it anyway. So a loss does them almost better than a win or a tie. This Canadian team, it's almost tougher to win a medal this time than 4 years ago. So, I think they'll go out and do their best. They'll go for a good performance, maybe over a good result. And if the result happens, then, you take that as it comes. So, I mean, for all France and the U.S. could swap places if there's some sort of freak result. But, if you're Canada, you can't afford to really take your foot off the gas and hope to ramp it back up again. So they'll go out and you'll try your best against Germany.
Yeah, you touched on something there. And as someone who's observed this program way back since the early Pelleru days, I actually am more impressed with their play this tournament, far more impressed of their play this tournament than I was in London for long stretches of it. They had a great game in London. They had a solid game against Team GB. They had an amazing game against the Americans that unfortunately didn't go their way. And then they had a game that sometimes happens in sport in the bronze medal game. It wasn't overall, in terms of form, the best tournament if you look at it, but nonetheless, the results gave them something wonderful. Do you think that they will be happy? Not they will be happy, but that Canadians should be happy if they perform well and continue to build, but don't quite medal this time?
I think they should, especially given the youth that's in the roster. I mean, Jessie Fleming and Deanne Rose and Ashley Lawrence and Kadisha Buchanan, Shalina Zadorsky. There's a spine there in that team that, will do just fine in the future. Whether or not Janine Becky continues to be the goal-scoring threat is the other thing. But, there are pieces there. But, it's an Olympics, and it is almost a medal or bust kind of thing where, we talked about that rugby team, and if the women's soccer team don't medal, the moment is over, essentially. Christine Sinclair might continue. Diana Matheson might continue. But, regardless, you can say, yes, the performance was good, but if they don't medal, then, it is almost not enough, which is a shame. Covering the game, if you can, those of us who continue to cover the program, continue to cover the team, will say, you know what, this team is building. But the general consensus might be that amongst the casual fans is that, they didn't medal. That's the big thing, which is unfortunate.
Well, and certainly, we saw the effect before, as I mentioned before. I was at a pre-Olympic friendly before London, and I think there was about 10 or 12,000 people there. And then I was at the one immediately after, and much different scene. And it's been a much different scene since then. All right. Just in general, in terms of the women's term, we'll stick with that to end this, and then we'll get your gold, silver, bronze, and wood medals. The Americans, can anyone stop them?
No. I mean, Germany, I think could. The U.S. did look pretty vulnerable, actually, against France. So, when they're on form, there's nobody that matches the Americans. But, it's the Olympics. This is the time to step up, and, you wouldn't put it past a team like Germany or France in a rematch to be a little more clinical against a team like the U.S. So, I'd like to keep out hope that somebody will. The analysis says no, the U.S. are the heavy favorites. They'll cruise, but I'd like to keep the door open and think somebody could. Yeah.
What about Brazil? Quick thoughts on the Brazilian women, not the men. We don't want to talk about them anymore. We have to right now, but the Brazilian women. What are your thoughts on their tournament so far?
I mean, gold, silver, bronze medal. You're talking about. I think that's the story of the games. Brazil. Women's soccer was illegal in Brazil from 1941 to 1979, and it still pales behind the men's game, obviously. And now when people are chanting Marta is better than Neymar at games, this, it's obviously a small sample size. But if people continue to lock on, I think Brazil is one of those teams that could win the tournament. You just asked who I think could. I was going to say Brazil. This could be the moment. And it could also represent a massive culture shift in a country like Brazil, which has been dominated by the men's game. And I think they've been fantastic so far. And if they continue to pack the place and have that, festive, crazy Brazilian atmosphere, you honestly never know. And I think it would be a fantastic moment.
Yeah, it would certainly be one of those quintessential Olympic moments for sure. All right. The gold, silver, bronze, wood medals, our longtime listeners know how they work. Essentially, your top three performances of the game so far. You can define that however you see fit. It could be Canadian focused, it could be international focused, whatever. The wood medal is a more negative story. Negative, I hate to use that term. It's a more critical story, we'll call it. So we'll go there. Gavin, what would your wood moment of the games so far be?
I would say, Hope Solo's, attempt at tongue-in-cheek before the first game with her picture with the mosquito net holding the giant bug bomb, saying she's Zika-proof. It is a chuckling moment for the Brazil fans to say Zika whenever she kicks the ball, especially considering that my thing is Zika has been detected in Florida. So when she's with the Seattle Reign and she goes down to play the Orlando Pride, is she going to do the same thing? For some reason, I doubt that she would. So, I just felt that it's, by all means, try to make it, a joke. It's funny, but, it just sort of seemed in bad taste because, if there's Zika in the U.S., which there is, she's not going to do the same thing.
Yeah, well, and the people that are chanting Zika deal with this every day of their lives, and she's a privileged athlete competing for a gold medal. That's
exactly. It's not even mosquito season there, so
yeah, exactly. All right, let's get to the positive side of things. Your bronze medal of the game so far.
You know what? It just happened this morning. Came shock. Ben Saxton, beach volleyball, beating Brazil on the beaches of the Copacabana. They even their record at 1-1. They needed a win after beating Latvia. And anytime you beat Brazil in beach volleyball, it's a good kind of day.
Exactly. Yeah, and I was watching that one this morning. Obviously, I was a bit torn because I've been watching a lot of judo. So I had the judo one in the back on my second screen, but on the first screen, it certainly caught me a little off guard, especially after they lost that first set. And that was a nice story there. I love the beach tournament. All right, your silver medal.
I'm going to say that first medal for Kosovo in judo. You mentioned it the other day. I can't think of her name off the top of my head, but not brand new country, but especially considering what's happened in the Balkans in the past, you love those moments where, a first medal for a nation and, it just happened to be gold, and you love watching that emotion. And so that's silver so far.
All right. Fair enough. And your top moment of the game so far?
You know what, for top moment, I'll look at the women's swimming so far, and these young 15, 16-year-old women who are putting the last 20 years of women's swimming Canadian history in the rearview mirror with three medals, couple medals in a couple days. They didn't get that, I think, in the last 4 Olympics, something like that. Mm-hmm. And it's swimming, of course, is one of those prestige events. There's still more medals to come. I think they've had a woman in each sort of discipline. So look out in that medley relay as well coming up. With the way they own the podium funding is, it almost comes at the expense of other sports that swimming's getting a lot of money. But, it's been fantastic to see just these young swimmers just getting these fantastic results. And it's a great way to start these Olympics to see, a lot of kids swim. And now they can look at the women's side of things and go, hey, look what's possible, and credit to them. A couple more days left in the pool, and we'll see what can happen.
And as someone who advocated for the value of the Pan Am Games day after day, a couple of those swimmers are training in this side of the city and around that Pan Am stuff. And I suspect that some of the facility changes and coaching money that would have went in is probably helping them out a little bit there. And also Penny went to school in Monarch Park, which is in our hood, Gavin. So she represent the neighborhood, eh?
Yeah. Well, that's it. And I mean, some of them didn't even. You look at Massey last night. I think it was Massey. She didn't even make the Pan Am team, and here she is, a medal winner. You might have to edit this out if I'm wrong, but the facilities are there, and that's my thing. At the end of the day, medals for me are nice, but if we have a bit of an inactivity problem in Canada. And if kids do get inspired to get outside and do something and try different sports, that's the real win. And that is the test that I guess we'll see once these Olympics are over.
If you're a local rugby club or your swimming club or I'm sure those gymnastics, they didn't get to where they wanted, but just the way they sort of went out and stuck together probably inspired some young girls too. And that's always a good thing, Gavin. All right. We thank you for your time today. I know you're tight in time. It's busy during the Olympics. Hopefully we can touch base again sometime in the next 15 days. But until then, if we don't, we thank you now.
Cheers. Thanks, Duane.
Bye.
Hey, it's Kevin of the Sports Podcasting Network. On SPN, on top of What's the Score, the Sports News Quiz, you can find a plethora of great sports podcasts. Hardwood Radio, Gridiron Radio, Sports, It's in the Game, Scuderia F1, the second most listened to F1 podcast in the whole world, Soccer Today, live radio shows like Open Lines After Dark, MLS Postgame Show, 202 Soccer Podcast, Off the Woodworks, and much, much more. All that on the Sports Podcasting Network.com.
Welcome back, and thanks again to Gavin for taking some time. Kevin, before we get into our stuff, I wanted to do a little update on the Dutch cyclist Annemiek van Vleuten. She was released from hospital today, and there was a statement that she made via her website. So I'm just going to read that real quick in case anyone hasn't had a chance to hear it. This is, again, Van Vleuten speaking, at least through her website, or Van Vleuten's words. Today I can leave the hospital and I will be taken to a hotel nearby, not the Olympic Village, because I need to rest. And the idea is that I can recover back at the hotel. The aim is to fly home Friday, and hopefully I can do that. The concussion is the reason they are keeping me here now. So that's a little bit of good news there, that it seems like she is recovering, Kevin.
good news, way quicker than anybody anticipated, and the fact that she's out of the hospital, like she's will be in a wheelchair. She's got a lot of rehab to do, but at least she was unable to recover now. And the concussion was a severe one, and it's a severe crash. And remember, she had three fractured vertebrae in her spine due to that crash. So hopefully she make amends, and hopefully it's not the end of her career.
Exactly. But, when that crash happened, there was fears that it could have been paralyzed. She could have been worse. She could have been dead. So it's good that at least she seems to be conscious and that she'll have, the ability to function moving forward at any rate.
And let's have the ability to function, Duane, is quite important. So that's the most important news I heard today.
All right. Let's go into our wood, bronze, silver, gold medal for Kevin and I for the day. So this is since about 24 hours ago now. We did the show 24 hours ago. So the last day of the games, not as crazy as a weekend day, but there's still a lot going on any given day of the games. So day 4, here we go. Kevin, let's start with you. And what do you have for your wood medal?
It finished about an hour ago. Not even. Serena Williams eliminated from the singles tournament. She lost in straight set to Elina Svitolina. And if you have listened to Game Set podcast or the Five Rings podcast over the last few months, you know what I'm going to say next. She lost another very high profile match where she was the underdog by very, very much for the odds, on the betting odds. She was quite the favorite to win. Svitolina was the underdog by 10-1, I believe. And so again, I'm just gonna say my red flag has been raised for the fifth time this season already in 2016 with Serena Williams.
Yeah, it's a different issue than doping, which has taken a lot of her attention. But she does seem to lose a lot. I'll have to go look at. I didn't have a chance to see that one, to be honest. I had other things.
What was weird, Duane, is her service, which she mastered all the games before. Today was non-existent. Double faults. And the crowd was maybe got to her too, because the crowd was booing because they are not necessarily a tennis savvy crowd. So the crowd was booing when she had a double serve, when she missed a double fault and all that. So that might have gotten to her. But the way she lost the match is the same way she lost other matches this year. Balls hit too hard, missed service, unforced
errors.
Exactly. Thank you. Unforced errors. So it's been a long day. Unforced errors for Serena, which is uncharacteristic of her play of her entire career, except 2016. So again, I'm not accusing anyone of anything. My flag has been raised for a while now, and I'm just reminding it that it's still up.
Yeah, it's not an athlete that's traditionally had mental issues. We're not talking about not to beat this horse too much, but we're not talking about Jeannie Bouchard here, who does an athlete that blows up real easy, and it's just her head going. She get inside her own head. In that case, it doesn't seem like an athlete that's like that because history doesn't suggest it. Age could play a factor. She's not a young tennis player anymore, but the tennis world made its own bed when it comes to this stuff, Kevin, and we talked a lot about it. If you want to go back to our Aussie Open coverage back in January, you can hear us talk in a lot more detail about the match fixing allegations within the world of tennis, which is what we're not suggesting that's happening, but what we're implying you have to ask questions about because of what happened. They made their bed, just like soccer's made their bed. So when there's weird results, a series of weird results, it's their own fault, really. They got into it, and I think that they would have been better off to just release those names back in January when those allegations came out there, because all we know now is that there's X amount of players that were shown to have thrown matches, and some of them were top-ranked players. So here we are.
Yeah, exactly. Here we are. Duane, and your wood of day 4.
My wood of day 4 is the draw and the format of the women's soccer tournament, because right now we're sitting in a situation here in Canada where, and it could have been for anyone. This would go equally for Germany had Germany won the game today, where the winner of group, whatever the hell it is, the third group within the women's side, G. It mixes me up because it's not ABC. It should be C at any rate. The winner of Group G didn't get a third place finisher. Instead, they're getting a second place finisher. And because the Olympics are so tight, that means that they're getting France, whereas the loser of Group G ended up getting a much weaker opponent in another second place team. And it just made no sense. So basically, Germany, by virtue of losing to Canada today, has guaranteed them a matchup against a team that is that is much worse than the matchup Canada's getting, and Canada won the group. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, we talked a lot about this during the Euros, Kevin, where there's a certain element of you can't help this, but what it comes down to is best thirds. We need to get rid of best thirds in major soccer tournaments. It's a ridiculous concept because the groups aren't equal. It doesn't make any sense to put best thirds in.
How about no more best third and had a group? Then what you want to do will be possible just with a normal bracket, right? Or drop the best third and had a fourth group. So you have 4 groups of 4. That's 14 teams. Best 2, move on. You got 8, 4, 2, 1. Works.
Or anything. Even if they insist in keeping it into 3 groups, then at least have some kind of playoff, some competitive way that you
round robin or something.
Yeah, I know time is an issue and all that sort of stuff, but the World Cup has it too, and the World Cup's even worse because that's a longer tournament that's getting settled sometimes in that case. So,
just go back to the comment of Gavin in the interview, Duane.
Yeah.
If you want to really make it worth, be the best and win it. And the way Canada played today, if they beat one of the best, and maybe Germany didn't go all out for that game, there's a possibility for that. Their only goal came from a penalty spot. But for Canada, the Tancredi was all out today. She played one of the best games of her career. So, there's that aspect of it too. Maybe it is a blessing in disguise. You play France, you beat them. Who's going to beat you now? Bring on the U.S.,
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, no, I get that mentality too. I just think it's not fair that it's just not a fair sporting concept. The best third places really muddy the waters, and I never liked them in any tournament. There's an example today that's concrete that I can point to and give a wood medal. So that's make that my wood medal and move on to I'll go my bronze first, Kevin, to get a little more positive and get myself positive again. And I want to point to upsets are always fun. They're what makes sports work, right? And we love a good upset. And there was no bigger upset today than Japan in the rugby sevens defeating the All Blacks. No one saw that coming. Japan is a decent technical rugby side, but to beat the All Blacks is absolutely outrageous.
The size difference, like not to be stereotypical here, there was a size difference. You're talking about the All Blacks, the Haka Masters themselves being there with their presence, their experience against Japan, an up-and-coming country with certain amount of experience, and does play in a region that it's complicated and a lot of very good teams. So their level is high up there. But still, you're talking about New Zealand losing to Japan.
Yeah, it's just a major upset, and it adds some spice to what has already been, I think, one of the darlings of the first week of the games is this Rugby Sevens tournament. So many people are falling in love with it. They're only guaranteed into the next 2 games, into Tokyo. I think that with this and the performance and the attention it's getting, even though the attendance hasn't been great, but the TV attention it's getting and the excitement it's creating in countries that drive the economics of the Olympics means that I suspect that it's going to have a longer run in those games. Speaking of which, we never mentioned that baseball and softball got back in for Tokyo. That happened just before the games happened, and we talked a lot about that. So
we kind of skipped that, but karate, baseball, softball. What was the other 2? There was
I'd have to go look, but I knew
snowboard. Skateboard.
Snowboard. The summer games. That'd be fun.
Skateboard. I think so. Yeah.
We'll have to go have a look. But yeah, no, I was excited about that. But anyway, moving back to the Japan thing. Yeah, no, phenomenal upset. And look, the only equatable off the top of my head, I'll give you one upset that to our Canadian listeners that they'll understand. It reminded me of Switzerland beating Canada back in the Olympics in Turin when they lost 2-0 to the Swiss, and it was like some Canadian that played for the Sudbury Wolves. Yeah,
Paul Di Pietro, who played for Montreal, which I remembered him playing when I was a kid, and played for Canada too, right? If I'm not mistaken, and eventually played for he's just switched allegiance to have a longer career.
Yeah, he was playing in Switzerland at the time, so he managed to get a citizenship over there and decided to represent them, play in the Olympics, give him a chance. I don't blame those guys for that. But at any rate, that was the only upset that I could think of that's equatable to this. I'm sure there's others, and if I went through their archive books for a while, I'd find a few, but that one jumped out. That's what it kind of reminded me. New Zealand still has a chance to bounce back, but if it's anything like what happened with Canada in that tournament, they never did kind of recover from that. They were just flat throughout that tournament, and hopefully for New Zealand's sake that the same thing won't happen to them, Kevin.
Yes, exactly. All right, let's move to my bronze, Duane. I have a little anecdote and story for that bronze medal as well. It's literally a bronze medal. you're seeing where I'm going with this, Duane.
Mm.
Kylie Mass was not expecting to win a medal last night, but I guess she wasn't aware of that fact because she just did like Penny did. In this situation, she put her head back and swam the fastest as she could. 100-meter backstroke. She timed her last stroke perfectly, touched the wall in second place. Third place, sorry,
Yeah.
for the bronze medal. And
Time with the Chinese swimmer, yes.
exactly. We saw it live and we weren't sure if it was a bronze medal. It was actually during the recording of the show of Soccer Today yesterday. We weren't sure if it was a medal. Me and Duane were giggly on mute because we were recording a soccer show. And I thought it was really funny. And once the show was done, we actually looked into it and she was actually winning the bronze right there. Kylie Mass, bronze medal. And, I think it's the first in Olympic history where Canada wins a medal in the pool in the first 3 days of an Olympic Games. And I figured out why, Duane.
Why's that?
You remember 2002, Salt Lake City, the Looney in the ice.
Oh,
You
yeah?
remember 2010, the Looney in the ice. Same in Sochi, they found a way to do it. Well, guess what? There's a Looney in the lining of the pool in Rio.
Oh, is there now?
There is. And that, for me, is probably the explanation why Canada has a lot of success in the pool so far.
All right, the lucky Looney has made his way to the summer sports. That's good for them. I wonder whether the rugby ladies buried something in the middle there or not, but we'll have to ask that question later on down the way. Another Toronto swimmer too, and I'm just going to point out, not rah Toronto, but wasn't there like big facilities and infrastructure?
Yeah, for the Pan Am, U of T, Byron McDonald, coach of U of T, which had a lot of influence on the national team of Swimming Canada.
Yeah, and so all those. I'm sure the old men screaming at the clouds about the Pan Ams are still out there screaming at the clouds. They're not listening to me anyway. But infrastructure matters.
Wait till the track cycling start and Canada gets medal that they're not usually winning. Because I think just because of the Milton Velodrome last year, it's enough to maybe have bridged that gap where Canada was finishing fourth in 2012. This year it might be medals on the track, and that will be because of our most famous words in the Five Rings podcast glossary: infrastructures.
Infrastructure. Fair enough. All right, let's move to my silver medal. And look, it's not a sport I watch a ton. I'll be honest with you, but I have to appreciate the dominance of the American women to win the team gymnastics competition. They are just so powerful, so above everyone else. They don't always win it traditionally, but they have always been in it and have always been competitive since that Mary Lou Retton in '84, famously there. It was just maybe their best performance ever. That is one of those. The Americans have a lot of dream teams. They really do. That speaks to the resources that they have in that country and the amount of attention they put to sports.
NCAA in the gymnastic world. Duane, have you ever watched, and it's probably yes, for a long time ago, but NCAA competition in gymnastic team, just like the Olympics, it's very similar. They're almost even more competitive than the Olympics are. The difference between the best and the worst in Division 1 of NCAA gymnastics, it's mind-boggling. It's crazy, Duane. And it's even more complicated to win a national title than to win an Olympic gold. So they come to the Olympics ready. And for them, we used that expression before, it's just another meet. It's Tuesday or Monday in Rio. I'm just here competing, do what I do best.
Well, they have the pressure. Look, I'll give a Canadian analogy again here. It's like our curlers are so battle tested by the time they get to the Olympics that the pressures of the Olympics aren't as affecting on them as they might be on a country that only plays in the major world. They're being forced to perform on cue for much longer and much more sustained period than other gymnasts around the world, basically because they just have such a hyper competitive process to get on the national team itself, right? And there's other sports like that with other countries, but certainly the American female gymnastics, which is the amount of pressure they have is unreal. Like they are the stars of the first week of the games in NBC's coverage, right? They are household names. They are on cereal boxes. They are absolute superstars down there. So for them to come through the way they did, I think that really, even though it's not necessarily a sport, again, that I watched intently, and I certainly don't cheer intently for the American female team gymnastics team, but I do very much appreciate how successful they were.
Exactly, Duane. Before I move to my silver medal, Duane, I have a little answer for you. You asked Olympic Statman earlier today if there was any other situation like Daniel Nestor, which he is playing as we speak with Vasek Pospisil, it's 2-2 in the first set while we are live here and recording. Don't go listen to us, but you know the score now. Daniel Nestor is not the only one who, if he ever potentially, hypothetically, wins a gold medal this year, to win gold medal 20 years apart, there is somebody. Yes, there is. Let me get the name right now. Manilo Di Rosa from Italy in team foil fencings have won gold medal in 1936 and 1956. But that seems like a long ball. It doesn't seem. It is a long time ago.
So Nestor would tie that if he were to win. And again, long way to go. But if he were to follow through and win medals 20 years apart, that would be just incredible, really. At any rate,
at Olympic Statman, thank you, Hillary. At Olympic Statman, very good follow on Twitter.
Yes, exactly. All right, your silver medal.
My silver medal, Duane, is a bronze medal today as well. And Megan Benfito and Roselyne Filion have been diving together for 11 years in competitive synchro since their entrée on the scene of the 2005 FINA World Championship in Montreal, where they were the darling of those championships. They were on the front page of newspaper, made big headlines.
How old would they have been, man?
I think 16 in that area, because right now Roselyne is in 29.
Oh, okay.
So,
all right.
so 20. Well, she was 19, she was 18. So
18. Yeah.
She was 18 back then. So that's where they began, and they had ups and downs. Got close, won some medal, lost some, a bit like Jennifer Abels and Pamela Ware now. But they finally got, well, they had other medals, but they got this one late in their career. Because 29 for an Olympian, it's pretty late, especially in the discipline they practice. Diving from the platform, 10 meter, is very hard on your body. The impact of the water constantly, boom, boom, from 10 meters high, it really is... It accumulates and it becomes not dangerous, but it becomes something you have to deal with, and it's pain and aches, and you know how you feel after competing day in and day out. But they got that confirmation redemption medal today. It was all about the last dive. They were 50 before the last dive and executed their dive perfectly. They were third after the last dive with only one team left to compete. They didn't time their dive perfectly. They stayed third. Roselyne Filion, Megan Benfito, bronze medal for Canada.
They seem like part of the furniture by now. As you said, this is they've been around since 05, so they've missed Athens, but they have been at Beijing, at London, and now here. And as you said, they've been in the medal chase in the synchro, especially. Now, both of them are individual divers as well, and we'll see them later on. But I suspect that, as you said, with the age that they are and the amount of wear and tear that is on the body, I would suspect that that dive that clinched them the bronze medal might have been their last synchro dive together. I don't know that, but I suspect it would be. So it was a perfect dive. I did actually have a chance to watch it live. It was during halftime. By happenstance, it became during halftime at the Canada soccer game. So I got it on my phone and was able to watch it on that. I had to be quiet because there was a woman in the bar that swore that she'd strangle me if I spoiled the result. So I couldn't cheer, but I did get to see it. And the other two, it was a I'm trying to think, Taiwan diver, I believe, and the British were the last ones down. They just missed it just enough that the Canadians' perfect dive it absolutely was clear as soon as the British divers hit the water that it was going to be their medal.
Yeah, and I said they missed their timing. They missed their timing hitting the water. That's what I meant there. They missed their entry in the water fine.
Yeah. No, it was, again, and they were expected. They finished where they were ranked, but that's not as easy as it sounds.
I was going to say easier said than done. In trying to finish where you rank, sometimes it's harder. What if last year you had a great year? Trying to repeat that, ask Eugenie Bouchard.
Yeah, exactly. So good for them, and another medal there, and it kept the streak going. Canada so far perfect on the well, I guess you can't. The Saturday they won one, but they've been perfect since, and that's something that's good. All right, Kevin, let's move on to my gold medal.
Okay. All right.
Come on. There can only be one answer today.
Yes, and I've chose differently because I knew you were going there. I figured.
Okay, if you're an international listener that's new to this show, I have covered in various ways the Canadian women's soccer team. The first time I was accredited to cover them was in 2002. That was at a U19 level. I have covered something like 20 or 25 Canadian women's games, full internationals. I've been to the World Cup. I've seen them. I've seen them at the highest levels. I've seen them at the lowest points. I've seen them when they're a program that had 2,000 people in the stands that were playing in fields, basically, and I've seen them in front of 30,000 at BMO Field screaming fans out for blood. I've been critical of them. I've been excited for them. I am a type of person that believes that I need to be objective when I cover them, but at the same time, I never want to lose my passion for Canadian athletes. So I always support the idea that I want them to win. So I have a very long history with them, is what I'm trying to say here. And they impressed me. They've never impressed me more than they did today. They beat Germany with basically their B lineup out there. They'd never beaten Germany before. Tancredi, who is a woman that I did not want on the roster, and
I was going to mention it, that you were very hard on her for good reason, and I think she listened to you probably over the last week, and sure, you know what, Mr. Rollins, today is the day that your words will be eaten.
I'm sure that had she actually heard it, she'd want to shove them down my throat, and that's the type of competitors that they are. And they haven't always liked me for that reason. Sometimes I've been banned from their press conferences before. At any rate, that's a different topic for a different day. Nonetheless, it doesn't mean that I don't support them and want them to do well. And as I said, today was just stunning. Like I'm almost at a loss for words at how well they played. I said it, I hinted to it a little bit. I'll speak in a little more detail. In London, they won the bronze medal, but they didn't play that good. They really didn't. They had one good game and they lost it to the U.S. They played like crap against France. It was maybe the worst game I've ever seen them play, and they somehow got the win. So, hey, that's how sports works sometime. The game against Team GB was decent, but this has just been perfect for 3 games, outside of maybe 20 minutes in the second half against Zimbabwe, where I can forgive them for having a little mental lapse at that point. They were up against a superior team, and they were up by 3 goals. But they go out today, and to go out today, especially with the circumstance, knowing that a loss was okay, that to me impressed me more than anything else. And to me, that's more valuable than any medal they could possibly win from here. I'm normally not like that when it comes to the Olympics. I normally think we do need to focus on medals because that is the measure that's been created of what excellence is, and we need to strive for excellence. But with this program and this team right now, if they lose to France, and it looks like it's going to be France based on the results as they're playing out as we talk, so be it. They've already won in my mind, Kevin.
Exactly, and it was impressive today is Tancredi 2 goals. The old veteran, well, old, I don't want to even say that pejoratively, but the veteran gets the 2 goals. A very dramatic performance for Canada. They were winning duels. It was a deserved performance. It was not a fluke. And even then, the goal of Germany was on a set piece. It wasn't from the run of play. It was a penalty. It was warranted. True.
Borderline one too. But it probably was a penalty.
It's the Olympics, right? You have to. They always seem to be a little more transparent, and they call almost everything at the Olympic level, it seems, even on the women's side. And we've seen it's a non-result game, but just be part of the game, and that's interesting too. Like, it didn't change the game. Canada just figuratively rolled their shoulders and just were harder at work and won duels and literally won that game.
Yeah, no, it just, as I said, it was maybe the most impressive day that program has ever had, and they have been playing so much looser in this Olympics than they did at any time since London. They surprised all of Canada in London, and I think that it probably overwhelmed them a little bit after the fact. They went from playing in front of 10,000 people to playing in front of 25,000 people at home. They went from having just basically guys like me covering them to like the entire national media covering them. They went, like Christine Sinclair went from someone that really soccer fans would be screaming at the mainstream media to give her more attention and advocate for her to win like the Lou Marsh Award and things like that, to actually winning the Lou Marsh Award and being, selling cars on our TV. Like, it was a major transition for them. And I think the pressure, particularly in the lead up to the World Cup in 2015, got to them a little bit. They were fine at the World Cup. They weren't great, but they were fine. But I think there was this expectation that they would be much better than fine. So that is why it's so amazing to see them sort of have all that pressure lifted off them and just play fun and free, and with the balanced team too. Like, this is a transition team, I would call it. There are a lot of young players on it. There are still some of the old guard on it. It's kind of a mix. I think probably next year, with the exception of Sinclair, I suspect, you'll see it pretty much 90% a complete turnover from London, and that's appropriate at that point because we're heading into the new cycle. So it's just a really nice way for that older core group that's still hanging around to go out, I think. And it's just really refreshing to see them play with the joie de vivre that they're showing right out there right now. And again, it doesn't matter what happens against France. Obviously, we want to win it. Obviously, as Canadians, we want them to win it. Obviously, as someone who's covered that program and has lived and died with both it and the men's program for years, I want them to win it. But at the same time, I recognize that what they've done already is an amazing accomplishment for Canadian soccer, an amazing, amazing accomplishment for Canadian soccer, and one that we should not understate.
Hashtag we the effing North.
There you go. Kevin, your gold.
My gold is a nice little story. Colombian Oscar Alberto Figueroa Mosquera in weightlifting. It was his final competition. He didn't tell anybody. He wins the gold. He's assured gold. And you know what? He's trying to beat his own world record. He fails. He doesn't beat his own world record. But guess what?
Yep.
Puts the ball down. Takes his shoes off. Puts them right then. And if you follow sport a little bit, any sport that shoes or combat sport or sport on a mat in front of public, when you leave your glove, your shoes, anything in the area of competition, it's a subtle sign that you're retiring. Puts them down, gets on his knees behind it, and starts crying. Looks at the crowd, embraces it, embrace the fact that he's the gold effing medal champion. He's got the world record still. He tried his best to perfect his record. He can't do it. You know what? If I can't top myself, it's 32. Why not go out in the most amazing, blazing type of fashion I can think of, which is right now.
Yeah,
putting the shoes there, and I'm gone.
I've seen the shoes left before, and it is. Sorry, I was coughing there. It is it's just such a symbolic gesture, and I've always stuck with me. There was a weightlifter in Athens, the big guy, and I'm trying to remember what country he was from. Was he Hungarian? Maybe there was massive crowd support for him. If you're an Olympic freak, you'll kind of remember this. It was a huge story back then. He did the same thing when he lifted and won the gold medal. Shoes went off, walked off the mat, didn't say anything. He didn't announce his retirement. He just demonstrated it. And it's kind of fun. It's kind of especially when we live in North America where we have like the, season long victory tours for these retiring.
Kobe Bryant.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of refreshing to see that kind of a subtle, graceful retirement. It's still telling people because you have fans and you recognize that. It's still, and you've earned that. I think that's the key too. The shoes on the mat, the last beer league soccer game I play, if I leave my shoes on the mat, I'm littering.
But the situation of him just after trying to go for the world record, then you leave your shoes there, it got all the meaning you can think of.
Yes, he's earned that, whereas other athletes may not have earned it, but nonetheless. All right, Kevin, that's a good show for that. A quick other minor wood medal, I guess, as I'm looking at my background. For some reason, the CBC main channel is deciding to show old sports rather than new sports. Anyway, why was the water green in the diving platform?
I don't know, right? I was thinking that does algae grow that fast? Because I'm going to have to actually go back on the cbc.ca website to the beginning competition of diving to see if it was that green. If not, good thing there's a shower after you come out of that water.
Anyway, yeah, I was watching when I was watching it on my phone. I said to the guy I was with, I was Dave Bailey. Hi, Dave, if you're listening. I said, Dave, is this natural water? Are they diving into like the ocean? Because it looked like natural water.
That would be amazing. You know what? Have the divers just dive off a cliff for this time.
Yeah, why not?
Hey, it's fair. Everybody's gonna have to do it.
Yeah, there you go. Maybe not. All right, Kevin, that's going to be the show for today. I do appreciate it. We'll be back at our normal time tomorrow. We had to adjust our schedule for other reasons for the last couple of days.
For the next 5 days, we go live at probably the exact same time. So
all right, and we've got a couple guests lined up. I'm not going to say their names till they're on to not jinx it, but one that's going to be. We have a gold medalist lined up, so fingers crossed that he won't cancel at the last minute. But I don't think he will. He seemed like a nice guy when I was booking it. So fun times ahead on the Five Rings podcast, Kevin. But until we get there, I'm going to shut up now and let you, as always, say goodbye.
Until tomorrow, 11 a.m. for Five Rings Daily live on your podium, folks.
With the training and the work.
You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.